Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Valentin from Neustark, and we enable the production of net zero emissions concrete. The net zero formula really provides the framework for everything we do at Neustark. So net zero emissions mean that whatever emissions we cannot avoid, we have to address through negative emissions, permanently removed from the atmosphere and safely stored. Now, concrete and cement with about 3 billion tons of CO2 emitted annually are, as of today, clearly on this left problem arrow. And I want to show you today how we can move it step by step to this right side solution arrow. So with our solution at Neustark, we integrate seamlessly in the existing concrete recycling process. So demolished concrete is actually the world's most voluminous waste stream. It's collected at the construction site and then typically delivered to concrete recycling sites where the material is crushed and sieved and then reused for the production of recycled concrete. So we go from chunks of concrete into a finer aggregate that you see on the right. So this is happening as of today. Where Neustark comes in is that we also deliver liquid CO2 to the concrete recycling site. We store it there in stationary tanks so that it can be contacted under controlled conditions inside our reactors with the crushed and demolished concrete. So what's happening there is that the CO2 is permanently transformed into calcium carbonate, so limestone, which can be added to the concrete mix and there replace about 10% of the cement, which makes the whole process economical. It also enables there to get to a net zero emissions concrete, which works as follows. What you see here on the left is a high-level concrete mix design with Neustark. So in 1 cubic meter of concrete, we have mostly aggregate and then calcium carbonate, and most importantly, clinker, which is the glue that sticks everything else together. So clinker is really the climate problem. During its production, a lot of CO2 is emitted, about 150 kilograms per cubic meter of concrete. So firstly, with Neustark, you need less of that clinker, which makes it economical. And then we also add a lot of embodied CO2 in the form of calcium carbonate to the mix. And like that, we can compensate for the clinker emissions, getting to a net zero emissions concrete. Now, what we see happening towards 2030 is that clinker will be produced at the cement plant using carbon capture and storage, so it will come with a close to neutral carbon footprint. And at this stage, our solution enables concrete to become a material that binds significantly more CO2 than it produces during its production, which we think is spectacular. What you see here is a rendering of our commercial pilot plant that we commissioned this summer in Bern, Switzerland. The company was founded by Johannes Tiefenthaler and myself. Also in the management team are Roman Vatter and Marcel Eckstein, responsible for finance and production. We are a spin-off of ETH Zurich and supported by the Swiss Federal Office for the Environment, as well as through the European Union through the program Climate Kick. So going back to our initial equation, we really want to transform concrete as a product from emitting billions of tons of CO2 towards binding billions of tons of CO2. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Valentin, for introducing us to Neustark. Do we have you on the line?
I guess so. Do you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you great. Wonderful. So thank you so much for joining at this time. We have a couple of questions from the audience. So first question is, what is your business model?
Okay, so we have two groups of customers and partners. One group are CO2 certificate customers who buy the CO2 storage or the negative emission that we create in our process. And then the other partner or customer group are the concrete producers who, in the first step, buy our technology. Then they use it in their production process, and we basically redistribute our CO2 certificate revenues to a certain extent back to those concrete producers so that they're incentivized to store CO2.
Great. So the next question is what are the costs associated with bringing CO2 into the mix, and how are you finding financial feasibility? You mentioned a bit about that in one of your last slides, but can you cover a bit more?
Sure. So concrete generally is a very location-dependent business. So there's different market dynamics for all costs of concrete production, but generally speaking, if we get this 10% cement reduction, at least for European cement prices, what we see, the process then can just pay off. If it doesn't, that's where the CO2 certificates kick in. That can then bridge this delta to an economic solution.
Wonderful. So the last questions from the audience is, how is the competitor landscape looking?
So there's a bunch of initiatives going on in the field of carbonation of mineral wastes, which is how I would define our broader market. In the field of concrete, certainly carbon cure is very prominent and commercially successful. So what we do actually complements quite nicely with them. So they carbonate the fresh concrete and we carbonate demolished concrete, so you can really run both of those simultaneously. And then really in the specific field of carbonation of demolished concrete, there's Blue Planet from the US developing comparable solution. And I think we differentiate by having a solution that really integrates into existing processes, which can be deployed right away.
Great. Great. So I think that's all. If you have any remaining questions, feel free to add them in the Q&A box, and Valentin will be either answering them today or we will follow up with him tomorrow. Just wanted to thank Valentin for joining us tonight. I know it's very late, so have a great rest of your day.
Thank you very much for having me. Looking forward also to your further questions and reach outs.